The average price of a new car is right below $50,000. $50,000. Just incredible. Just incredible. And with gas prices going up, insurance prices have been going up, interest rates on car loans. In November, a 60-month new car loan was 7.22%. So the average new car payment right now in America is $775 a month. That's a lot of money for a car payment. I wanted to bring in a car industry expert, a friend of mine who's been in the car business for more than 2 decades. Jon Reyerson is with us via video link up. You can watch us live on YouTube at the WCCO radio channel. Because, John, I know you were fascinated by this story in the New York Times that is comparing the cost of owning a car to the sort of similar obstacle that people are feeling when it comes to buying a house. These numbers, these are big numbers for a monthly car payment, right?
Yeah, they're large. And, during the pandemic, we saw it reach an all-time high where the average car payment in North America was over $800 on average. So that's not factoring in. And even the statistic you said earlier about 50 grand for a new car, that's for a car. When you upgrade that to an SUV or a luxury SUV, you're in the 80 grand range for an average selling price of a new car in North America for a large SUV or luxury.
And when you're buying an 80 grand vehicle,
Yeah.
you're putting some money down, but for sure you're over $1,000 a month in your payment, right?
Oh, easily. Once you break the $100,000 mark, which 10 years ago was really rare to find a $100,000 vehicle, now your Escalades are 120 grand, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and then at that point you're looking at a $2,000 monthly payment. $2,000 for a car. I think what's also interesting is when you factor in the average cost of an EV. Electric vehicles back in the day were 30, 40 grand.
Right.
Now you have the advent of the Rivian and Lucid, and now the average EV for a new car in North America is over 60 grand for an EV. So even that's incredible. So then you have to look at finance rates and how much money you put down and how to stay in front of depreciation on that product. So you're putting tax, title, license, you're putting more than that, and then you want to get ahead of that because on a new car, depreciation of about 10% in the first year, plus about $1,500 a month is what you figure the car is going to depreciate. So you look at that for new, and then you look at used, and that's the other shoe that's dropping here is new car pricing is so much higher than it had been, but used car pricing is also rising, and there's such a shortage because now we're 3 years past pandemic where the inventory was so limited that people entering into a lease was dramatically less. And now we're 3 years past that. So the numbers coming out of leases are so much fewer that the supply is really, really low. And then you look at a $20,000 car, that's even more crazy. If you look at cars under 20 grand, it's impossible to find any sense of that. Pre-pandemic, there was a joke that, if you showed up with a 120,000 mile Honda Accord, the owner would say, gosh, what are you going to give me? Now the joke is they show up to a dealer and say, I know what I have. How much you going to give me for it? That's also interesting. So then that begs the...
What do you
Yeah.
think has changed, John, as we're talking with Jon Reyerson about cars, affordability, how difficult it is for people to get into these cars? Have we as consumers do we want all the bells and whistles? Is this, I guess, how much of this is our changing taste versus just the reality of like the cost of tariffs and the cost of steel and the cost of electronics and the computers and all the stuff, just the actual cost of the vehicle?
Well, yeah, I think, yes, people want all the bells and whistles, but all the bells and whistles have become so commonplace in cars,
Sort of
right?
standard, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like thinking of adaptive cruise control 10 years ago, that was only for the ultra luxury stuff. Now you've got a base model Mazda or Toyota with all of that. So, yeah, people want the bells and whistles, but I
Mhm.
also think, the conversation needs to be had. I strongly encourage leasing when you can, because if it makes sense for you and for what you're going to do with the vehicle, leasing helps you get into that car at a much less price, at a much lower entry price than financing it, right? So if it's a $800 monthly finance payment, you're probably looking at 450, five
Mhm.
hundred to lease. And then you have to ask yourself, and you work with someone you trust that knows this, but if you're going to keep that car, don't sign up for a 15,000 mile a year lease. Sign up for a 7,500 mile a year lease, because the miles don't matter if you're the one buying it at the end.
If you're going to
So
buy it at
why,
the end.
yeah,
Yeah.
so why have such a big payment, right? I think the other really interesting thing in that article that you sent was look at the average loan term. So pre-pandemic, the average loan term was like 36 months. Now it's 65 to 72 months. So not only are the payments going up dramatically, the length of the loan, people are paying it and holding on to that loan longer. So that also then makes you look at leasing and looking at that route, because if you can lease the vehicle, there's so many, I think, benefits to doing that. It stays off your balance sheet, so it doesn't limit your borrowing power with other things.
It's
There's
a
a way
bit of a
to
mind shift,
write
though,
that off.
right? Because
Hmm.
people feel like, oh, like at least if I'm buying it, I own something. But what do you really own? I guess you own the
Yeah,
cost of repairs and how
thank you.
expensive that is.
Yeah, you own the liability of it. So congrats. That's, I mean,
Yeah,
I,
yeah. I mean, it's different, right? As somebody, and I've leased a couple times, and
yeah.
I'm somebody who likes being at a newer
Mhm.
car. So the idea of leasing is appealing, but
Yeah, and even banks know that, right, Jason? So if that's why your lease is usually a 3 to 4 year term, because that's when
mm,
the heaviest depreciation occurs. So the
yeah.
bank wants you to pay for that depreciation, and that's what you're financing. That's what you're borrowing against. But
All right.
uh,
Let me ask you about gas prices because
yeah,
people are texting in with
hmm
what they're seeing right now 651 461 9226 because I gassed up today. And
hmm
obviously, whenever you have conflict going on in the Middle East, as
right,
we have right now in Iran, and with the Strait of Hormuz being
hmm
impassable, that is, even though most of our gas in Minnesota, we get oil from Canada, and that's where our gas, that's how that works for us, but it's
hmm
a global market and
right,
it's effect. But I gassed up at 349. AAA is seeing gas prices up about 80 cents from what they were a month ago. That's significant
hmm
percentage wise. Is there a point where what is the point where the gas price gets so high that people start saying, like, maybe I need to look at different cars or look at changing how much I drive, those kind of things? When do you see that?
Well, I think the auto industry has already started to change that based on look at how many cars were always a V8 that are now a twin turbo six cylinder. Lincoln
True.
Navigator, great
True.
example. They got ahead of that and they're like, we know that, that some of that has to do with OPEC and having to have certain mile per gallon regulations that the government requires all the brands to have. But I think some manufacturers already gotten in front of that. That's why you see hybrids, not just pure EVs, but hybrids that help with the gas engine and then also the battery assist. Um, I think Americans' desire to get in a car and drive is, that's not a sensible. That's not a sensible. It's not a. I
Right.
don't think you can. I don't think you can. I just made up a word.
It's
Sensible. That's a
it's not
word.
a sensible a sense of something. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Well,
not.
you know where
We're
I'm
not
going.
rational about this,
No,
right? It's more
people.
emotional.
That's the beauty of the road trip, right? And doing this and doing that, and that's fun and great. I think we'd have to see a monumental shift in gas prices to finally make people say, yeah, I'm not going to be buying these larger vehicles, because those large vehicles exist because of the American demand for them, for the
Yeah,
the larger SUVs like that. So, but yeah,
yeah.
it's
We love our big cars here in Minnesota. You end
mhm,
up a lot of people tow a boat, so that becomes like a practical concern. But it's mostly we like the safety, we like being
mhm,
up, and so we've been able to afford it because
mhm,
gasoline just really hasn't been that expensive, realistically.
right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're also seeing more electric vehicles coming to market with like you saw, you had it up earlier, the Rivian, the R1S, and now they have the smaller one, the R2, and Tesla's done a nicer job with their higher bodied, Model Y and their X and all that. But I think it's there. Yeah, there's the R2, which is coming out. That'll be a big one, and that's around 50 grand for the R2. So interesting. There's going to be some options, and I just think I think the American market demands to have, if you don't have a car you can quickly pull in and gas up, then the EV has to be a quick charge. And you and I have talked about that. And until you have the infrastructure to have a 5-minute charging, it it's still not a conversation for a daily driver
for most people.
for most. Two, like we've talked about it, a two-car household where maybe one person lives in St. Paul and works at a radio show downtown Minneapolis. I'm just spitballing here.
Just
But
for
if you were
example.
to, I mean, but if you were to have that situation, then yeah, that can make sense because
Makes
you're
sense.
charging and then you're charging there. But it's not a, hey, we're going up to the cabin. It'll take 2 days because we have to stop 3 different times along the way.
Hell
That's
yeah.
not gonna.
Right.
Yeah, so there's going to be a shift in that, but that's all. That's all moving along. So
Jon Reyerson, car guy, car expert. We appreciate it. This was really good. Thanks, John.
well, I'm a huge fan. I mean, I'd be listening anyway. So
Of course, naturally.
yeah, naturally.
Yeah. And if you're watching on our video stream, you can tell that John is not joining us in Minnesota.
No,
There's a little tan on his face.
why I'm smiling so much.
I hope somebody's shoveling. You're doing some shoveling right now, but somebody is shoveling for you at home, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Jon Reyerson with us here on CCO.